actually even generate. But we shall see what happens. This whole AI thing is kind of hard to imagine on so many levels.
I'm convinced by those who don't think it's a problem, and I'm convinced by those who do. I mean, I have no idea, but the arguments from people who know seem to me equally persuasive on both sides of the debate.
Yeah, I mean, yes, obviously AI could do a lot of amazing things, especially in the area of healthcare and things like that, and is already to some degree, you know.
Yeah.
But insofar as totally integrating artificial intelligence in the creative conversation, I mean, I suppose it's going to happen sometime sooner or later. The question is, because as we all know, they have brains with like a million times more capacity than ours. Surely they will be able to write better poems. But
will they need to?
Say again?
Will they need to? They might tell better jokes, but will they laugh?
No, well, you know, at a keystroke, you can write better poems than the next person. That's the point, right?
All right, I'm gonna have to mute you all, despite the very lively conversation. So we are already live and recording, so I will mute you all and throw to Mark.
Catch. Well, thank you all for being here this wonderful evening at Lit Balm yet again. And today we have a great feature. We have reading for us today Christopher Merrill, Diane Mehta, and Steven Cramer. And they've all just released books from the fantastic Arrowsmith Press out of Boston area. And we look forward to hearing them. But before we start that, I'm going to introduce our co-host, Jeffrey Cyphers Wright, who received his MFA after studying with Allen Ginsberg. He's best known as a new romantic poet. He is also a publisher, critic, eco-activist, impresario, filmmaker, puppeteer, and artist. Jeff is the author of 19 books of verse, including Blue Lyre and Party Everywhere. His poems have appeared in the Cafe Review, New American Writing, the Brooklyn Rail, the Hurricane Review, Posit, and many others. And in the anthologies Best American Poetry, New York Insiders, and Contemporary Surrealist and Magical Realist Poetry. Jeff's latest work, a book of sonnets and artwork called Doppelgangster, is out from Mad Hat Press. Jeff recently won the Sir Vision James Tate Prize, and he publishes Live Mag out of Brooklyn.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this reading today very much. And I don't know what I was going to say. How about that? Anyway, it's great to be here. And I'm going to read a little poem called Paradise Answering Service. This is from the book Fuel for Love that Mark mentioned just won this James Tate Award. Paradise Answering Service. November draws its purse strings tight. The moon is eaten by a pack of clouds. My old lamp blinks, its wiring worn out. Between useless and euphoria, I sleuth for meaning, meandering from Chelsea to the river, listening to the shivers, to Robert Kelly lifting scripture off a mirror, on windmill attack mode, milling around in my grab bag of jeans. At the end, the language we suspend will shepherd us past midnight's derrick, leaning on eternity like a vagrant. Oh, I'll pay for the foolish love I spent when you were on top of my to-do list. Steve Luttrell is actually in a band called The Shivers. All right. And Cassandra's been here a long time too. It's 4 years for the series, and Cassandra's been here so long and so wonderful to have her. Cassandra Atherton is an award-winning prose poet and international expert on prose poetry. Her prose poetry is widely anthologized and has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. Cassandra has published more than 30 books and is currently writing an illustrated book of prose poetry on the Hiroshima Maidens with funding from the Australian Council and the Victorian government. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, an introduction, and co-edited the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. She's commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia, and she runs her own light factory. And we're going to see some of it today. Cassandra Atherton.
Hi, happy Easter, everyone. It's Easter Sunday here in Melbourne. I'm going to read a poem that you will not be surprised by. It combines my love of the pre-Raphaelite paintings and prose poetry. So this one's called Mnemosyne. It's just been published in the wonderful Ekphrastic anthology that has just come out with the Ekphrastic Review. Once more, light curls around the sides of the drawn blind as I wake you, marsupial heavy with sleep. You blink into the stripy darkness of the room as I block the light with my body on yours, my hair reflecting a pre-Raphaelite glow on your pillow as if it is memory's halo. We skip the queue entering the Vatican museums and I wrap your finger in my palm. At the statue of Erato, I say there should be a muse of prose poetry, and you photograph me between Erato and her sister Calliope in a long strawberry dress. What we remember of yesterday's argument vanishes in hot shade among the gallery of statues. You talk of all that's been forgotten here since Pope Innocent VIII issued his 15th century bull against witchcraft. The corridors of memory are crowded. Mnemosyne's candle fails to illuminate the curated air. Now we stare at the Sistine Chapel ceiling, wondering how to take it in. You whisper of Sunday school classes and fervent recountings of biblical narratives, saying, please take off your hat. I'm lost among the depictions as if they might be conjurings of an alternative 16th century life. Past lives are nonsense, you say, as images fall from the roof like memory's rain. Next, I am introducing the incredible Mark Vincennes, who, as you all know, please join in, is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published over 40 books of poetry, translations, and fiction, including more recently, I think everyone knows these ones, The Pearl Diver of Irunmani with White Pine Press, A Splash of Cave Paint with Spite and Dival, a chapbook, An Alphabet of Last Rites with Chavina Bava. The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars with Lavender Ink, who I believe Mark will be at New Orleans Poetry Festival reading from that book. The Mayfly Codex with Spite and Dival, Three Telltale Love Signs with Subpress Collective, Thieves' Canto with Nix's Mate, and just recently, The Visitation, a novelette from Sir Vision. Mark is also a prolific translator. He's translated from the German, Romanian, and the regulars know the last one's French. He's published 11 books of translations, most recently an Audible Blue selected poems from 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz, which won the 2023 Massachusetts Book Prize for Translated Literature. His own work has been translated into many languages, including Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Romanian, Greek, German, and Icelandic. He is currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincennes is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He has lived, everyone, come on, all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are more, here we go, spice bush swallowtails, wild indigo dusky wings, and red humped oak worms than bipedal hominids. Wow, Mark, I do love a good indigo dusky wing. It's a pity I'm not out there to see one.
Do you know what that is, by the way?
I did Google it. It looks pretty good.
Caterpillar. So yeah, I thought we'd do caterpillars today. And in the animal vein, here's a poem of mine from a book that I just finished called No More Animal Poems. An apex predator. Cool yourself off with dragon blood, my own grandmother had said. What she meant, of course, was that your own significance might also be mythical or even hypothetical. Only names and fortunes change were the last words she ever said. The night after her passing, a very human full moon was pinned to the sky. I remember toasting her afterlife with a strange selection of other creatures. They were all gathered here in their respectful and respective numbers. How do you enter this violent paradise when actually you want to be out there seeding space? The oldest tortoise says, staring from the mirror of his own heavenly order. These are the deep concerns of humanity, says the jaguar Raina Maria, who growls and paces. But of course, they all still live in ancient Sumerian time, says the greater horseshoe bat, collapsing his wings, then taking a long-earned nap. A fly, in her youth, saunters into the congregation and bumps into several faces. Excuse me, she says, before settling into her younger, buttery paces. She'll go anywhere the sweetness seizes her, says an ancient grey moth, cleaning her fangs with a chamois cloth. Lord save us all, says the grey dormouse. Follow the legends deep in their sugar jowls. She crows like a bird. And then, before swooping down to grab the moth, the bat says, and what is mythology but a way of bringing significance to each and every single bite? And now, I am delighted to introduce the first of our readers today, who is our old friend, Steven Cramer, whose 7th poetry collection, Departures from Rilke, was just published by Arrowsmith Press. In 2020, Mad Hat Press published his 6th book, Listen, which was a must-read by the Massachusetts Center for the Book. His other books are The Eye That Desires to Look Upward from Galileo Press, The World Book from Copper Beech Press, Dialogue for the Left and Right Hand from Lumen, Goodbye to the Orchard and Clangings, both from Saraband. Goodbye to the Orchard won the New England Poetry Book Club's Sheila Moten Prize and an honor book citation from Massachusetts Center for the Book. Steven's poems and essays have appeared in many journals, including The Atlantic, Kenyon, Paris Review, Poetry, and elsewhere. And in the anthologies, the Autumn House Anthology of Contemporary American Poetry, the Poetry Anthology, 1912 to 2002. He was a recipient of grants from the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. He founded and now teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at Lesley University. Welcome, Steven.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you all for coming. Can you hear me? Okay. Those in the back row. I want to just special thanks to Mark for publishing Listen, which book that, well, I guess, you know, every book matters to the person who wrote it, but there's something about Listen. I wrote Listen. It took like over 10 years to finish because something happened, a project happened in the middle of it, and I never knew whether I'd really recover the impulse to write that book. But Mark did a beautiful job, and I'm very grateful to him for that. I would like to read a new poem, which in my own mind I call sort of post-Rilke poems, because the Departures from Rilke are adaptations, sometimes very free adaptations of poems from Rilke's new poems, part 1 and the other part. And I'm going to end with a new poem as well, and just read a few from Departures from Rilke. The first one is called The Midnight Zone. The Midnight Zone is another way of talking about the deepest part of the ocean, which I think is still the Mariana Trench. I'm not sure. It certainly is the Mariana Trench is part of what we call the Midnight Zone. There's a reference to Calvino, and the poem is pretty much referring to the Calvino of Invisible Cities, and a reference to Diogenes, who was the Greek cynic who held a lantern up to the face of Athenians to see if he could find an honest man. And that was one of the least irritating things that he's known to have done. So this is called the Midnight Zone. It's snowing at the bottom of the sea. Dead skin, dead plants, sand, soot, dust, and shit falling from the light into Earth's deepest hole. Snowshine, it's called. The blood orange vampire squid packs it into white balls, eats. What doesn't eat the snowshine eats the eater. Shrimp in the midnight zone spit flame at danger. Sea cucumbers shuck their ghost skins to make decoys. And the one thing uglier than an anglerfish is anglerfish sex. At our ugliest, and given the right lure, who hasn't filter fed down to the midnight zone? Past the upper reaches where the bristlemouth shines sea blue, past the larvacean, its vaulted wing-shaped antechamber spun out of mucus clouds and rivaling Calvino. As for the plug ugly angler, the lamp dangling off its brow brings to mind the scowl of Diogenes. Born by the Black Sea, his only home a clay wine jar. He died by holding his breath, some say. Others claim raw octopus or a septic dog bite. Others blame raw octopus or a septic dog bite, or say they saw his body flung off the city walls, left for boars, his last request. Everyone agrees he died enslaved. Not a poem I expect to be read at many weddings. Okay, I'm going to read just a few poems. Two of them actually have a visual aid. So I'm going to share a screen so you can see. People can see that, right? Oh, now it does that. Can I make that go away? There we go. The two poems that I'm going to, will be accompanied by something visual are two of Rilke's best known new poems. Both of them depart a great deal from the Rilke poem that they depart from. And partially they do so because they depart from the visual prompt that came to me to use. Rilke has a poem called Portrait for My Father as a Young Cadet, and it's the portrait of his father as a roughly World War, maybe late 19th century soldier. This is called A Photograph of My Father's Twin. This is him. I never met him because he died at Anzio in 1944. And his name, Alfred, is my middle name. So he's been sort of with me for my whole life. And I think those who have read Rilke's new poems will recognize, I think, what this poem very generally relates to of his poems. A Photograph of My Father's Twin, KIA Anzio, January 26, 1944. I don't know, but I think this was probably taken in Sicily, this photograph, before they got on the boats. The eyes dream. The forehead seems to sense some far-off thing. The mouth seduces without smiling. Under the ammunition pouches, one hand rests on a holster clipped to its pistol belt. The other so at ease, it appears to vanish, as if the first to grasp what's waiting in the future. Everything else about him lies hidden in a sienna tint so deep, I can't tell who this disappearing soldier is. The picture fades in my fading hand. So it's clear that I'm as unfaithful to the secondary source that the poem is based on as I was to the Rilke source. All right, I'm going to read four poems from the book and then one more poem after that. This is one of Rilke's, it's certainly, you can hear that it's based on a passage from the New Testament, from Luke, in the betrayal in the garden, which I reread after reading the Rilke poem and working on it. It's where Jesus knows he's going to get caught, and he goes to his disciples, and they're all asleep, which I think is quite interesting and funny. It's called Olive Country. And maybe I'll just mention one other thing. I found myself when writing these poems that I could steal from anything if I was going to, depart and misbehave with Rilke. So this one actually has some lines that are close to a sonnet by Michael Drayton that is usually called You Not Alone, which is actually a beautiful love poem that might be a religious poem. Olive Country. He climbed under the gray leaves to olive country and put his dusty face into the dust on his burning hands. End of story. Blind now, before I go, why do you insist I pray to you? You not alone, you I cannot find, weak in the others, absent in stone, missing even when we are together. I'm alive with people's grief. I meant in you to raise them, faceless shame. An angel came, an angel came, said some, or just another night absently leafing through the trees. The disciples twitched in their sleep. The night that came was an everyday night, like the hundreds that leave us to our dust, nights that dogs sleep through, and stones, nights that suffer all night into morning. Pray for an angel, and no angel comes without the night to wrap around itself. Lose yourself, everything takes its leave. Father denies you. Mother won't bear you. I'm going to just read this one and then one other from the book, just for time's sake. This is called Tombs of the Courtesans. And I for a while, I called it Tombs of the Prostitutes. And people who tell me what's right and what's wrong in my poem said, no, you got to keep courtesans. It just prostitutes. It was not an update. It was an anachronism. So it is Tombs of the Courtesans. It's a big woven list, so it's a challenge to read. Tombs of the Courtesans. Their streaming hair, faces cracked with dirt after so many years buried inside themselves. Their eyes shut, having seen too far. Skeletons, flowers, mouths, and inside those mouths, their teeth glaring like ranks of ivory pawns. And flowers again, amber amulets and bones, hands crumbling on shirts over inert hearts. But under the rings, charms, and sapphire of their love gifts, in the silent crypts of sex, opened petals swell toward the vaulted roof. And amber amulets again, both strung and unstrung, strewn, and clay cups fired and glazed with their portraits, and the rubble of vases still sweet with the essential oils pressed from irises, and all kinds of household gods, happy to be in this household god heaven, and loosened belts, dung beetles, tiny cupids with big dicks, lips parted mid-laugh, dancing girls and boys, athletes sporting gold medals modeled on bows and arrows, their strings pulled back, their arrows aimed to target talismans made into birds or lower mammals. Knives, spoons, needles carved from bone, shards of reddish pottery that depicted, it seems, 4 horses standing at attention, 16 black legs strict as the inscription over an entryway you'd rather not enter. And yet more flowers, more loose gems, a lyre shapely as a teenager who shows off her curves under her sheer bathrobe, then unveils one ankle bone like a talc white butterfly building from its chrysalis. So here they lie, packed with their things, prizes, jewels, utensils, gadgets, toys, and all rained down like fallout into a dry creek bed. Once they were riverbeds themselves, and adolescent boys, who live, of course, forever, surged into them, their urges to mature churning inside their insides. Some streamed down from the mountains of boyhood and scavenged the river bottom for the perfect rock, stalled, if not for long, as the tall banks steeped their minds in feeling. The shallow water deepened and came clear, and the whole channel filled with whirlpools. And below those whirlpools, fresh depths. The riverside heard birds for the first time, while the night bore one star after another, as if the skies were a country open to all. That's a long one. That's the longest one I did. He wrote, a number of the new poems are quite long, and none of them sort of struck me to do, though, even though I like certain translations of them, but it's really pumping iron. But I have to show, okay, one more slide and then one more poem. What do I do? Here we go. Yeah, everybody can see that? I should maybe have had a trigger warning before I showed it. That's me at 17. Pernell Berkeley, who did the cover for this book, sketched it. She was my dear friend. She is my dear friend. But now I gotta find where it is. Okay, this is often looked at as sort of a companion poem to Rilke's poem to the photograph of his father. I believe it's usually translated as photograph of myself or photograph of the poet as a young man. This is called Pencil Drawing of the Poet, 1968, for Pernell Berkeley. A dear friend of mine who's a faculty member at Lesley said, "Thanks for showing us that picture of you during your period as a serial killer." And I still like the guy. There's a reference to having your hair like a girl's. And that was actually a true slur from the adults to the generation that wore long hair. You look like a girl. One would hear that a lot if you looked like that. Pencil drawing of the poet, 1968. Family history stiffens in the thick eyebrows. Childhood fears shadow the gray eyes. Long hair, like a girl's, looks foolish now. But he's no fool. And here and there, a scholar's diffidence. A fringe of mustache shades his narrow mouth. Lips pursed, but quick to speak up, if asked. The jaw's still a boy's jaw. His level gaze feels safer when allowed to look away. What's in store for this draft of lines and shading? Pain, of course, and joy. Maybe some work worth remembering. It sure looks like he's planning something. Get rid of me. And I'll read one more. It probably takes about, 3 minutes to read. There are a number of things that are useful to have in mind. Philip Guston was an abstract expressionist painter who then late in his life did these very grotesque figurative paintings that have cancer all over them, and he did too. He wrote a book called A Life Spent Painting. When you hear number 9, number 9, number 9, you either know what I'm referring to or you don't. And if you don't, listen to the second to last track on the Beatles' White Album. Hitchcock hated shooting on location, so a lot of his greatest films have kind of fake looking rear projection shots, which some people argue about whether that's just him being lazy or whether that's part of his style. I choose to believe the latter. Okay. It's called Where Thoughts Come From. A murder of crows wing black vectors across my window, called double hung, a touch suggestively, and a light nowhere I see. Back to coffee in a chipped cup, then out of a burrow in my brain comes ashes, ashes. The playground sing-along some believe invokes the Black Death. We all fall down. Years ago, I'd have begun my boneyard of butts by now. The last one stubbed next to the next one, next to the next to last, then one last stump. A waste heap late Guston got so right, or so I thought. Revisiting A Life Spent Painting turns up half a dozen smoldering insomniac self-portraits, Klansmen with black cigarettes, studded shoe soles and horseshoes, and what looks too much like an entrail sandwich, but no mass graves of ashtrays. Memory misremembers. That we know by heart. Tougher to hold in mind that self itself is pure fiction, the first person not to trust. Without your body, your brain would get nowhere. Rings true enough, but give it thought. Since when did body and brain get divorced? While I was unearthing the memento mori of my smokes, my butt pile played the part of the skull, and someone with more than my math skills might calculate a given poem's risk benefit by timesing 9 eternal lines to time by 9 Marlboros in 90 minutes, factoring in 2 packs a day. The benefits, the poem, of course, for what that's worth. Why all the 9s? Think The Lives of a Cat. Think Yeats's Bean Roast. Think baseball players and the innings played. Think planets before Pluto got traded for a dwarf. Think how many stitches in a timely stitch. Think how many stitches a timely stitch saves. Think number 9, number 9, number 9. Thinking of time, For a sweet spot of it, why not start with touch? How a hammer heft befits the hand, our first fingerings, rummagings of all kinds, ivory-laid paper riffled, thumbed, like a thigh, I feel, braille, and how, hand in pocket, even the blind from birth can tell a penny from a dime. And the sex, my sister told me, when she first felt the tumor. So much for touch and stirring up the dead I thought at rest. In today's times, a 40-foot wide ring made of skulls, ribs, and tusks from 60 mammoths. No one knows for what. The mammoths, though, there's an animal, there's a mammal worth a sidebar. Even its idiocies appeal. Gulped by sinkholes, washed away in mud flows, drowned after falling through thin ice, the male beats out the female more than 3-to-1 for getting himself killed in stupid ways. Man, can't we identify with that? And you, my audience of one, my true penny, Hamlet's nickname for the ghost, remember what Sis said. I'm dying young, but not before my time. To you then, the guy I can't look in the eye unless mirrored or snapped, don't quit stirring up artifice. Be me on the sly, in and out of frames, like my crows or Hitchcock's cameos. He loathed location, directed outdoor scenes before rear projections on a soundstage, giving the facades of Lombard Street, Bodega Bay's dunes, and the headstones behind Mission Dolores their auras of beautiful bakery. Thank you for your forbearance on that one.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate it. Beautiful reading. Next, we hear from Diane Mehta, who was born in Frankfurt, grew up in Bombay and New Jersey, studied in Boston, and now makes her home New York City. Diane is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Tiny Extravaganzas from Arrowsmith last year and Forest with Castanets from Four-Way Books 2019. Diane's essay collection, Happier Far, comes out 2025. Her recent work is in the New Yorker, Virginia Quarterly Review, Kenyon Review, American Poetry Review, and A Public Space. Her writing has been recognized by the Peter Henning Literary Award, the Cafe Royale Cultural Foundation and Fellowships at Cittadella Ranieri and Yaddo. She was an editor at A Public Space, PEN America, and Guernica. Her latest project is a poetry cycle connected to the Divine Comedy. She's collaborating with musicians to invent a new way of working through sound together and working on a long-term project with a chamber ballet in New York City. Tell us a little bit about that.
Hi, thank you for having me. And Chris and Stephen, it's nice to see you again. I just have to say, Stephen, I really like my crows and Hitchcock's cameos. So I have all these collaborations, maybe because poetry is such a lonely thing. So I went to see a friend who was collaborating with this ballet, this chamber ballet. So I saw the performance. And since my book was out, I said something about it in an interview and about why I liked the performance. And so the choreographer wrote to me and said, "Do you want to come to a rehearsal?" So I said, sure. I don't have any background in ballet or any particular interest, but I started going and I decided to make a commitment, which is connected to Dante, really. So I've been going once a week for about 3 or 4 months. I've written a few poems, although I didn't think I was going to write poems. And now I have 20, 30, 40 pages of notes. And I've just kind of figured out a book. So it was really more about making a commitment, having conversations, seeing how they work together. I'm learning a ton. Is really fascinating. It's a chamber ballet with 5 women and 1 understudy. So they really develop most of the work themselves. And then the choreographer choreographs, but they're developing moves and trying to figure out how to share their body weight. And it's really fascinating. So I've gotten kind of intrigued. And the collaboration with the musician is about trying to figure out how to wear, kind of like to be a musician, even though I'm not a musician, like a call and response, rather than having my poem set to music or having someone in the background. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm trying to figure out maybe how to improvise, how to be lost. I'm not really sure. So all these are really slow projects, and they're very processy. And the Dante thing is I'm going to start by reading a poem about a woman named Sepia, who was an heiress. She was very rich and her husband was dead. And she's in the purgatory and her eyes are stitched shut. And so I'm reading Dante on kind of a forever loop with two other artists that I met, a cellist who shows up in another poem and a porcelain artist. So we decided to just keep reading forever. And we read about a canto a week now. It's actually slowed down to a canto every few weeks. And part of that is about commitment. So it's changed the way I make commitments in my life. So this woman is named Sepia the Wise, and she's in purgatory. So she's going to make it in the end. But I'm intrigued by Dante's women, how he treats them, sometimes harshly, but he's also eternalizing them in another way. And this woman there's some ageism here that really bothered me. So I really focused on this woman, Sepia the Wise. She took so little space up, violent and true, eyes sewn shut in the project of transcendence, unwise Sepia Salvani, heiress of Siena, rejoiced over the slaughter of countrymen she ought to love. She cursed them, and her nephew Provenzano too. She laughed at God. I fear you not. Alea aecta est, the die is cast. A woman shrieks, she is undone, undone. Inside her widowed dynasty, unable to see her fortune. Dante veiled into her simple story a morality play about the Roman Empire fracturing into city-states. We believe Dante's one story of Sepia because she was convenient. We believe wives and mothers are greedy because they are easier to make villains of than admirals or popes, bloodying up your town. And believe me, she is worth your love. Dante writes the story of impoverished wealth of mind, immortalizing Sepia's crime. We cringe at Sepia's psychoses, but our initial readings never quite suffice. It happens to every woman at sundown. How does a woman resist her madness in the middle of her life? I forgot to start the timer, so I'm going to start now, but I'm not going to read too long. This poem is called Beat, Heartbeat, and it's an sort of anticipatory grief poem, I guess. It's about my father. I've been reading a lot of Larkin, and my father is alive. Beat, heartbeat. Undefined by pleasure, our measure is no measure. Clairvoyant in the canted trees. Tremolo, a space between people remembered for a time, keening to the end of rhyme. He sees the runway of the streets, parading love of life the strut, muses on his former life, a quarter century in the grave. Today is not the day, dreaming, he wishes he were dreaming. Scrolling in a shining sky, his name arranging. He defies heaven for the haven of a ratio. Epic to hour as object to memento. Turntabling memories in a spin. Resolving beat, heartbeat to divine. He wonders if he loved enough. If she was true. She made him laugh. My offspring, my accounts, my land. Was it astralizing? Was it grand? Spine straight, knees young, grit was all he wanted once. To enter each season in a groove, friendship and scenery and love contented all. Quietly, he lingers in the wander, richer, longer in memory than the spell of next, unfolding in his hands, unfixed. Okay, this is going to be tearful. Landscape with Double Bow. It's about a cellist who plays magnificently with two bows in one hand. And we were picking grapes that day. Rondeau is what you really want, solo and refrain. We and each, the musical improvisation of the operatic day, sonic scavenging and comedic jigging. Inside some becket of one another. Oh, wouldn't it be grand to be a whole note, dragged across the bridge of your singular, sound expanding double bow? To be orchestral, to be drunk, to drink the velvet sun from the arbor trellis, fruit of purple grapes we plucked, bunches of dolce to color our throats, and that improvised word spun truth. I, terrified, say I can't derive on cue death, light, blueprints that fit the choral codes of what music thinks writing is about. We twisted grape notes so easily off their stems, screw of death in cupped hands. We follow seductions of light. You move above and underneath the strings in C strokes. One bow was not enough to match the warmth two bows create. So you invented ways to get more harmony, upper bow and under bow, independent but close, staccato and legato, legato and staccato, to choose a way to hear the world and harvest sound in it. Curve of bow, curve of earth. Curves your eyes interpret as ultraviolet. Still you want more color, more sound to harvest, more distortion. Pale blue resonators you sculpted in local clay. Land in sky blue above the land, distort the sound you widened already. You are looking for a vibration lower than what the lowest string is tuned to, pitched so low your ear can't find it. Imagination. Lower. Solo of magma, baritone of fantasia. I cannot rogue my syllables and improvise around temptation ears like yours, but love the glut, the secret, the grand distortions of your polyphonic heart, which believes in ghost tones. What is true? Grapes chandelier from the arbor and ripen on the tongue. We jammed the grapes inside a bowl so plentiful and ate their tiny hearts at lunch. Okay, now this is totally crazy to switch to this, but I had an essay I was writing and rewriting for my book, and so I ended up, for one phrase, listening to hip hop all morning, and I ended up writing what I want to call a hip hop poem, but it's really not a hip hop poem. It's kind of a spoken word poem, which is not what I do. I'm a relatively conservative poet, but here goes. So it's this is a bit of an experiment. I wanted to know what you were doing, but you were dying. It was a ruin. And every day I thought grief wouldn't boom, but it had its own music, all the killings for willing participants of the military drones, unmanned combat, to feel eyes disembodied from your body sent, all the bombs we manufacture from the best designs, the most creative mechanical minds. We wheel all the feelings and the dealings and sweep away the people, for they are stealing all the land that was stolen in the 40s and the 60s and the 1850s from the squatters and the hippies and the citizens of the inner city, because they had no cash. They had no validity, no mortgage, no Rolls Royce, no $50,000 diamonds on the finger, but you killed them because they were the opposition. They were killers, so you killed them. And if it doesn't hit your mind that music is a grief of history with a rhythm you might not like, so you would turn your back on me, but I am still a citizen of me, and I do not need your respectability, so rot away in your condition of indifference and leave to me my tears. I am arrested in this plot and love my life. You will not end it, even if you end it, for I am still a human. Maybe I am superhuman. Can't you see it? Do you have a mirror for the cave you call philosophy? Do you have a philosophy for the mirror? Do you travel with your aunt? Do you start everything in the middle? Do you have eyes like drones? And do you see a target in me? For I am not your target. I am not your gold or silver or in your pocket. I am a seer. I am a prophet. Yeah, I don't know what happened to me. Okay, I'm gonna read one more and then I'll be done. And so this is a poem called Plum Cake. I'd make a plum cake when she died. A lamentation, grief bake. Kaddish through blood recipe, all of its colors shrieking at me. A sweet take on her love. I gaze at the street. Tree branches out front are tangled. My floor is slanted. My house cage is so small and dark for all the summits, slopes, and swamps of feeling. I am not to be purple plum decided in any still life of grief or reminiscence. No wafer like religious feeling, never. She will never be human again. I knew I wouldn't make it. Italian plums are sweetest. I should find them in a market when days are longer. Fruit of aging, gift of goodness. A friend who lost a friend and made the cake said plum 6 times in one paragraph, so full of yearning are our phrases. Snow bright is her hair on the bed, knobby knuckles, skin folded on her chest. She'd be delighted to celebrate her death. I love that, she'd say happily about the plum cake wake. Plums pooled around the cake slab in the photograph, bloody and marvelous. Skylight took her in. I couldn't make it. Thank you all so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Diane. Wonderful reading. Next, we hear from the illimitable Christopher Merrill, who has published 8 collections of poetry, including Watch Fire, for which he received the Lavin Younger Poets Award from the Academy of American Poets, and many edited volumes and translations and 6 books of nonfiction, among them Only the Nails Remain, Scenes from the Balkan Wars, an amazing book, by the way, Things of the Hidden God, Journey to the Holy Mountain, The Tree of Doves, Ceremony, Expedition, War, and Self-Portrait with Dogwood. Chris's writings have been translated into nearly 40 languages. His journalism appears widely. His honors include Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres from the French government, numerous translation awards, and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial and Ingram Merrill Foundations. As director of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa since 2002, Christopher has conducted cultural diplomacy missions to more than 50 countries. He served on the U.S. National Commission for the UNESCO from 2011 to 2018, and in April 2012, President Barack Obama appointed him to the National Council on the Humanities. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Cassandra and Jeffrey, for putting together this really wonderful reading. I love what my colleagues were reading, such gorgeous music. And since the one thing that unites the 3 of us is that we all grew up in New Jersey, which is maybe one reason why I travel so much around the world, to get away from that. And indeed, Steven and I grew up in the same town, so I'm going to, he was a little older than me, and so I'm going to copy his example and read to you a couple of poems from, prose poems from a book that I've been proofing all week. Marvin Bell and I spent 10 years writing prose poems back and forth across the ages, and so I'm going to begin with one of those so you'll see that one of the constants in my writing life is war. This is called Samangan. What are the odds of surviving a high-speed head-on collision on a rural highway in Afghanistan? All I knew in the moments before a taxi passing a truck veered into our car was that it would hurt. My hosts, believing the Taliban would not disrupt our journey to a pre-Islamic shrine in Samangan, had advised me to wear a light green shalwar and kameez, pajama-like trousers, and a tunic. Hence the man who pulled me from the wreck thought I was Afghan. A crowd had gathered, which suggested how long I had been knocked out, and they were yelling at the taxi driver. Both cars were totaled, and both of my hosts had broken their arms. A doctor from our group was cradling an unconscious boy whose fate we would not learn. What did I know? Where the Hindu Kush meets the Central Asian steppe, Buddhists carved a monastery in a hillside, which the Mujahideen later used as a base in their fight against the Soviets. The walls and ceilings of the caves were black with soot, but they had survived the Taliban, unlike the Buddhas destroyed in Bamiyan. Our guide, accompanied by a guard armed with a Kalashnikov, knew less about the stupa than the doctor, who drove through a sandstorm to a hospital in Mazar-e-Sharif. The Taliban spring offensive was about to begin, and after an attack on Kabul with suicide bombers and gunmen killing or wounding hundreds of men, women, and children, its Department for the Prevention of Civilian Casualties warned drivers, quote, to follow all traffic rules, close quote. A sense of humor goes a long way in a war zone. And I'm going to read now from this book that Arrowsmith published called On the Road to Lviv. It began really as a series of notes that I made on my first cultural diplomacy mission to Ukraine in 2006, just after the Orange Revolution. I made another mission in 2015, not long after Russian forces had invaded eastern Ukraine and occupied Crimea. This was in the wake of the Maidan Revolution. And I kept making notes and writing about various things Ukrainian. One of the constants of this book-length poem was my longtime love of Adam Zagayevsky's poems, particularly his famous poem To Go to Lvov. And when Adam died in 2021, I came back to writing more and more about this. And then, of course, the Russians invaded Ukraine. It happened to be on February 24th, 2022, which was my 65th birthday. And I felt compelled to keep writing about in whatever this book was going to become. As it happened, I was due to spend about 6 weeks in Poland that spring on a Fulbright. And there in the city of Poznan, I came face to face daily with tens of thousands of refugees from Ukraine. So I was completely caught up in this during the time in which I wrote this poem, which has subsequently been translated into Ukrainian. Askold Melnichuk kindly published this book in both English and Ukrainian translation by my friend, the poet and diplomat and translator Nina Murray, and it's been translated into Russian. I should say at the outset that on this very first mission, the very first drive, I was driving west from Kyiv to Lviv, and our control officer, let's say this in State Department parlance, she was a Foreign Service national. She was, let's say, she was going through menopause, because here in the coldest winter in memory, in an unheated van, every few minutes she would roll the windows down when she was experiencing a hot flash. And in the back of the van, I was sitting with a a rather petite Ukrainian woman who had been in our program, and we were so cold that we took out all the clothes from our suitcases and duffel bags and covered ourselves with them and tried to survive. And I was so cold that the only thing that could take my mind off my teeth chattering was thinking about Adam's poem and then trying to make some notes about what I saw along the way. And so this is how the book begins. The globes of mistletoe in the bare trees in an irradiated area west of Kyiv, a silent colony of children signing prayers in unison, and gloveless women hauling sleds of kindling along the icy path by the soccer pitch on which the SS shot the Jews, and murders of crows clearing the road of carrion, save for the wolf's splayed on a drift of snow. The miles unroll in an unheated van past wheat fields, woods, and telephone poles topped with empty stork's nests spreading out like mitres. In every village there is a new church, crowned with a green dome, onion-shaped and layered with murals of the Savior resurrected beyond the statues of the fallen order, of planes and tanks, of a seminarian scorned by his classmates and a novelist crippled in the Great War, of the Red Rider spurring his horse to fly toward a ladder nailed to a cross outside a cemetery embellished with blue, green, and orange banners, then castles, cattails, and horse-drawn carriages in which the children huddle under sheepskins, and a pack of stray dogs loping across the road, and tractor trailers sliding down the hill. So much for gauging what a traveler from the Imperium can document with his own eyes at 30 miles an hour. O fickle muse of history, I cannot imagine or invent lines for the peasants glimpsed in this dream of war and independence. Somebody must repair the train, the bridge, and the iconostasis hacked to pieces by a believer who lost his only son to cancer. Somebody must draw a map to the statue of the Virgin in a village cleansed of its original inhabitants, where a peasant arguing with a young priest over the deed to the cathedral raises his fist, and the barracks empty at daybreak. A scene derived from a 19th century novel refracted through a diplomatic lens. Why are we driving to the western border, not to Odessa, birthplace of the brilliant Anna Akhmatova and Isaac Babel? Natalia, the Foreign Service national, who rolls her window down with each hot flash and will not roll it up again until I cloak myself with clothes from my duffel bag, ignores all questions deemed political, including venues, meals, and accommodations, and rushes near abroad, i.e. Crimea, the Baltics, Belarus, and anywhere one Russian nationalist can be found. Nor can I fathom what our mission is, since cultural diplomacy is not easily defined, and so I turn again to Adam Zagajewski's poem recounting an imaginary journey to his birthplace, Lvov, in what was once Poland, then Soviet Ukraine, and now an independent country in the crosshairs of irredentist Russian politicians and democratic-minded Westerners like me, who are determined to develop civil societies around the world, utopians, in other words, who may wreak havoc in a quest to undermine the power of authoritarians to dictate what their people must believe in order to survive. Impossible, of course, yet here I am east of Lviv with my teeth chattering and my divided heart, imagining scenarios in which I do not have to risk my life to satisfy the foreign policy imperatives of a regime at war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other lands which rarely merit mention in the news. When Zagajewski read at Vilenitsa, in the courtyard of a medieval castle that fell to ruin long ago, to the poets seated beneath a chestnut tree, which rained ripe chestnuts on their heads at intervals no one could time, their attention may have wandered, for they kept looking up as if in prayer, since poetry is prayer. This festival in the karst region of Slovenia brought kindred spirits from around the world to revel in the word made manifest. Here in the courtyard and later in a cave, the organizers called their tectonic cathedral. Say amen then to the poets then, who savor a blaze of words under the chestnut tree. And I'll close with another cultural diplomacy mission poem, if you will. I spent an awful lot of time in Iraq during from 2011 on, undertaking various cultural diplomacy missions, and one of them resulted in Baghdad becoming a UNESCO City of Literature. When Baghdad first elected its first female mayor, I was thus accordingly invited to attend their International Flower Festival, which sounded just too good to believe. And I traveled there with the mayor of our city, and we had a really remarkable time over the course of 5 or 6 days. And on the last day, we had the event that I'm narrating here for you, and it's called Shockwave. I should tell you that after this event, we went back to our hotel. Well, maybe I'll tell you that after I read this Shockwave. No sooner did I say that it felt as if we could be driving in an almost normal city than a car bomb detonated 300 meters away in Baghdad's Karada neighborhood, killing 4 policemen at a checkpoint and wounding 8. A shockwave broke over our armored vehicle, momentarily deafening me. Flames shot up between the buildings we passed, and black plumes of smoke rose from the street littered with the burning hulks of cars. Faster, said our Iraqi host, a poet professor who had a story from the war with Iran, how he was dragooned from a classroom during an exam before he could finish checking his answers and ordered to the front, how he deserted with 2 friends in the midday heat, entered what he called an artificial forest, and met a security agent who gave them water to drink, how his plea to visit his mother did not prevent his arrest. When he escaped from detention, his father took him back to the front and begged the commander to let him go. Careful, the poet told the driver. The blare of sirens everywhere. The city was on high alert. The bombing marked Saddam Hussein's birthday. A village dating from the time of the Sumerians had just been retaken from ISIS. More suicide bombers were likely on the way. The guards at the Babylon Hotel took their time inspecting our vehicle. My ears are still ringing. And what I wanted to add to that was that we got back to our rooms. We were leaving very early the next morning, and it was now close to midnight. And I was packing when there was a knock on the door, and I went to the door and I found the mayor, who was a rather large man, and he was in his underwear. And I thought, what is the mayor doing in his underwear? And he said to me, have you looked at the swag they gave us? And I said, no, not yet. He said, they gave us Rolex watches. And I said, they're probably knockoffs. They can't be real. And he said, they're real. So he came in, I opened up my swag, and sure enough, there's a Rolex watch, which I later learned was worth about $8,500. And there was a lot of stuff there that was worth a lot of money. So I had to call the poet professor who was our host and say to him, Sadek, we're really grateful for these gifts, but I teach at a public university, and the mayor is a mayor, and we can't accept these, so we'll leave all this at the front desk. And it was probably close to $40,000 worth of stuff. And so it seemed to me that that's where poetry can take you, to a Rolex watch you can't actually keep. Thank you very much.
I think I know one or two poets who have actually kept that Rolex watch, but anyway.
Nothing like stolen time.
In
Why
fact-
was he in his underwear? Did I miss that? Why
I-
was he in his
I
underwear?
think he was, after that close call, he was probably not thinking completely clearly. And we got on quite well, but maybe not quite that well. He was a really terrific mayor, believe me.
Sounds like there was some hashish involved or something, yeah.
We work for a public university. He's a retired professor and the mayor. No hashish, not on this trip.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, thank you guys for this amazing reading. Thanks to Arrowsmith Books for publishing these amazing authors, Christopher Merrill, Diane Mehta, and Steven Cramer. Check out their books from Arrowsmith Books. Fantastic work. And just briefly, next Saturday, we have the launch of Spoke 10, which includes an amazing appearance by the poet Robert Kelly, his wife Charlotte Mandel, who's a great translator, and the Brazilian poets Tiffany Higgins, Marcia Wayner Cambeba, Livia Natalia, and Alex Simoes. And Tiffany will be doing the translations, of course. So hope to see you then. In the meantime, I'm going to toss a baton over to Cassandra for a moment.
Hey,
Hey.
are we heading into the open?
Yeah, I guess so.
Excellent. Well, I have a lovely list in front of me, and it always starts with the incredible John Wessex, who has an Amnesty Wombat with him this week.
Thank you. I will read to you a little bit of Jonte's divine parody for you today. Midway through my life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke up alone in a forest of than spending time in the midst of that rank prose. Fearing predators, I huddled like a bush-tailed rat behind a rock all night. At sun and, figuring I might find some relief there, made my way through thickets of thorny compare in a dozen steps toward my goal. A three-headed beast blocked my path. Thank you for sharing. Well written, it does not meet our current needs. Best of luck with your writing career. No matter how I twist I turned away, hung my head in despair, and cried, "Oh, won't someone help me?" Hi-ho! I lifted my head to find the spirit of Kurt Vonnegut standing beside me. With his wiry hair and brushy mustache, he was not the older Vonnegut who'd mellowed with age, but the younger, more sardonic author of Cat's Cradle and Sirens of Titan. There is a way to reach your goal, but to do so, we must descend into the very bowels of despair. Are you willing? Pangs of doubt assailed me, and I asked, am I worthy to embark on such a journey? How can you think of failure when one who loves your work sent me to guide you? Who else could it be, I asked, but Amy, who signed my copy of The Girl in the Flannel Skirt at the LA Book Fair, unless, of course, it was Allegra Goodman, author of Intuition, perhaps Cheryl Olds? Let's stop this discussion before it slows down the plot. Vonnegut lit a cigar. I followed him through the bushes of cardboard characters and overused phrases until we entered a cave. When my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I found that we stood before a massive steel door. A bronze plaque hung beside the D-bold lock. Hope should be abandoned by those that would enter here. What the hell is this place? I asked. Exactly. It's the afterlife for those who sinned against the English language. Vonnegut leaned close to the lock and spoke the magic words. So it goes. The door opened. Although I'd rather get a root canal with a masonry drill, I followed him inside. In the air, email messages flittered like bats made of ASCII characters. Dear sir or madam, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Barrister Augustine Bello of the Nigerian Gas and Petroleum Corporation, and I am contacting you regarding a proposition of mutual benefit a few years ago. Out of my way! A man in a plaid sports jacket shoved me aside and dashed after the receding message. Nimble as he was, it always remained out of his reach. What is this place? I asked. The antechamber where those who never cared about books spend eternity chasing get-rich screams while bill collectors pursue them. Vonnegut turned. Let's go. Dodging the scam emails fluttering in the stagnant air, we walked downhill until we came to a river. Waterlogged copies of Angels and Demons floated like dead fish in its gray water. Thornton Wilder stood on the bank in front of a raft. When we got closer, I noticed it was made of copies of Our Town that had been lashed together with mint dental floss. I can't take him across. Wilder pointed at me. He doesn't belong here. The Muse sent him, Vonnegut said. No, he's following the Muse. Wilder sighed and lifted his pole. In that case, hop on board. And so, like countless students ferried to the tedium of adulthood by that play, we let Our Town take us into hell.
Wow.
And you can read the rest of the story in my collection, Arugula, and I will post a link to that in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No one starts an open mic quite like you. I mean, I think it's a nightmare if you are dreaming of a forest of bad metaphors. I will say I've told my students that adverbs are toxic, so I'm kind of with you on that one though. Thank you so much for sharing. Vijaya, you are next up. I'm sure you have something wonderful for us. You always do.
Thank you so much. It's I was trying to figure out what to read after all this stuff, and I cannot decide, and I don't know how long it should be. So I think I've settled on something medium length. Let's hope it is. This is called The Goddess. And I don't know if anyone knows Indian mythology, but the creator is Brahma, the preserver is Vishnu, and the destroyer is Shiva. Brahma's wife is Saraswati, and she comes out of his navel. Being a musician and a poet and a writer and a scholar, I worship Saraswati if I have to worship anyone, which I don't. But if I do, then Saraswati is the one I love. And so this is mainly about her, though Brahma, has to figure, I guess. So there he goes. Okay, the goddess. Brahma dreams of music and chants an entire world into existence. The words escape from his vast mouth and swirl into stars, planets, interstellar dust. He dreams himself into being, dreams that his wife, Saraswati, serene and chaste, and seated on a white lotus, grows from his navel, holding the Vichitra Veena, which he plays to the rumble of his voice. There are others who arise from his words, which pour out in eons from his meditating mind. Darker shadows hiding under his amygdala emerge, crowding out, shoving aside his words. They arise, giants and monsters, passionate, inarticulate, wordless, grunting and pushing. Meanwhile, his wife plays on, eyes closed, legs folded beneath her, on her white lotus, transported. She smiles. And as she dreams herself into song and life, she dreams Brahma into being. And his words are the words she created with her bicameral mind, where she lay athwart the void and yearned for him. And the monsters, jostling and grunting, crowding in, those were there when she turned over the rock and stooped to see what she could find under it. Curious to understand, she lets them cavort. She is bored. But she is the chaste one, the pure one, the singer, she who dispenses knowledge, words, music. She longs for one who will teach her what she knows. She is lonely. She's eaten up with longing. She opens her eyes. Her smile fades. For all around her, when she turns a stone face, she sees what she dreamed into being, emptiness. How can she change this? She closes her eyes. That's it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. What an
Thank
incredible delivery as well. I love the motif of the stones is so effective. Thank you. Thank you for
so
reading.
much.
I always love it when you read. Next, we have the brilliant DeWitt. It's hard to come up with an epithet for DeWitt because he's everything. So DeWitt, what have you got from the chair?
It's called A Glib Proposal. I considered editing The Best American Silences. I would invite nominations. And in addition to the reprints, the distinctive silences of the year, there would be epigraphs such as Ezra Pound. It would be famous contributors, but after their titles and attributions, the pages would be blank. On Love, perhaps by Howard Stern. On Justice by O.J. Simpson. Life After Death by Elvis Presley. The final selection, of course, would be my own, My Heart.
You love it. I love it. Who can get Elvis Presley into a poem quite like you? No one. That's so good. Thank you, DeWitt. We always love you reading. You always got something so tasty for us. Next up, we have May. We're excited to have May back. May's read for us before. So, May, what's on for us this week?
A poem that has to come with a trigger warning. So it's Guts, the Holocaust in it, from Hawaii. You know, I was born and raised on a sugar plantation in Hawaii, titled When Nothing is All You Can Do. I came home from high school and told Uncle Hiro that some people said the Jews were never rounded up and killed during World War II. People like that, he said, they all bullshit. How would you know? I asked the 8th grade graduate truck driver for the sugarcane plantation, the sloppy weekend drunk. I was there, driving one truck for the engineering unit. You never seen such suffering. Their wrists, they was like this, and they so weak, they just fall down and lie on the ground. Their mouth was moving, but no can make sound, like they was going make right there in front of us. And we no can do nothing for them. We try, give them chocolate. They fight and eat the pepper and all, and then throw up. We try, give them water. They throw up. We had to leave them there in the road. We give them our blankets, but we had to go. We no can do nothing for them, nothing. And they tell us, thank you, in English, thank you. He cried and cried and couldn't stop.
Wow, that's so moving, such a stirring piece. Thank you for sharing that. It's got some incredible images in it. Thank you. Next we have, and I'll probably mess up the name and blame it on my Australian accent. I'm going to go with Sif Eldeen, but my E's and my I's might be tripping me up. Can you tell me how to say this one, please?
It's Saifadeen.
Saifadeen. I
The
got
L silent.
Okay, nice. I'll remember for next time. What have you got for us this week?
So I have a poem that's modeled after Adam, and I'm gonna butcher the last name because today is actually the first time I've heard it said out loud. Zeganowski, that Steven and I actually worked on a lot. I gave it to Steven thinking it was like the best poem ever, and he was like, no, this isn't working. And I was really attached to it. So we did a lot of work on it, and I think it's in a much better place now. I placed it as the first poem in my chapbook. So it's called The Sound of a Forgotten Letter. I look at a photograph of the city I was born in, its crowded roadways, its gray buildings, the white dome and marble floor of the Umayyad Mosque, the pointed minarets where you can hear the call to prayer that rises from them like 99 shots from twin Glocks, and I imagine what was. The houses look tortured straight into sewn by a soldier with a rock knife. Under the arch of Suq Hamadia, men walk side by side with me. I smelled their sweat over the merchant's cologne. If I look closely at the photo, I will miss the black vests of the Muhabarat as they detain a university student from protesting the emergency law. Instead, I'll see a young man who travels from the mountain down the steep avenue and into the city, standing on his bicycle's handlebars. I won't see the Free Syrian Army soldier shot by an 18-year-old studying to be an architect because he wants to design the buildings that will replace the rubble. Maybe I'll see another boy thinking about a girl reading Nizar Kabani until jasmine springs from his hands and blossoms over the flowers on the girl's balcony, her tete planted before the desert knew the sound of death. I hold the photograph up to my eyes, and instead of an ISIS soldier hearing the casing of his bullets as it hits the blood-soaked streets of Damascus, I'm a man who plays out with my wrist so close to the fretboard I can hear it whisper. The thick palms of the Derbeki player's hands turn red from the cowhide. The belly dancer's abs quiver. She rolls her vertebrae, leaning back her head until the band on her hair falls loose. But mostly I feel like the child who sleeps on the carpets of the mosque. Its arabesque contains all the shapes of the world that cannot fit a photograph. The child tries to determine if he can eat a square or a triangle or a hexagon until the janitor comes to teach him more surahs from the Quran. The sheikh, busy writing his Qibla, which says Islam is a religion of peace no matter what the terrorists do. And the janitor sits down with the child and pushes the air around the letter Qaf. He teaches me this letter's the letter the Syrians knew in a time before the war, that it comes from deep in the throat, and you need to drop your chin and let your whole mouth say it. The most beautiful letter, as it's the hardest to say, while the letter we replaced it with comes easier, but at a much greater cost.
Wow, thank you. It's so visual and really stirring imagery. I love the way you keep coming back to the photograph. And I guess I also want to shout out to those people in our lives who are editors for us and who read our work and make it better by making sometimes tough suggestions. No one likes feedback when it's constructive but often critical. So thanks to Steven and to all other editors out there as well, or colleagues who read your work or friends. Next up, we have Linda, who always has some wonderful beats for us. And I believe she has one for us this week. Maybe Mark will be able to hear it from down the road if she's loud enough.
Okay. So I'm a little obsessed with a song. And so this is what it's about. She sings and there is no answer for Billy. Her face angelic in its intensity, icy blue eyes, sometimes open, often closed, freckles dotting her nose. She is the vessel that contains the song. Is it love or something about hope I am hearing? Her lyric has taken root in my mind long before her birth. Its familiarity awakens me, stimulates what has lain dormant. Her potential to influence me in this moment, crooning what is impossible, yet somehow hope has me hanging on every word she sings. Her breathy vocal and soaring notes are arranged so impeccably as to arouse and evoke deep emotion. Quote, what am I made of, unquote. She sings and she does not answer, and neither do I. Lost in a haze of reverie, agreeing with her lyrics, quote, and I don't know how to feel, unquote. Our conundrum, to use unadulterated logic, is seemingly an unattainable feat, a myth of sorts. I exhale lie my head against a soft pillow, wishing such a song as Billie Eilish chose to write as a soundtrack for the movie Barbie, which I chose not to view, could ever have posed any question I could fathom. Her words, no more than what I hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. She is a vessel that contains the song. I love that. And I did see the Barbie movie, and I did wear all pink, and that was pretty fun. Next we have our dynamic duo are going to finish up Open Forest. We have badass Brooklyn, Cindy Hockman. No one does it quite like Cindy. And then we will have Bob from the kitchen. So Cindy, what do you got?
Well, as it happens, today I started reading the Divine Comedy. Who knew? And after I read the intro, which totally confused me, and then the first canto, which further confused me, I wrote a one-line alliterative poem. Certainly not as ambitious as John's or Diane's and Stereo. First impressions upon reading Dante's Divine Comedy. I am altogether allergic to Alighieri's Allegorio.
Love it. Love it. That's enticing. I love it when you base your poems on literature that you've been reading. Thank you, Cindy, all the way from her lounge room. And now I always say we have to end with Bob because he always gives us something to think about. It's my Easter Sunday morning. I'm sure that he's got something I can take away with me for the rest of the day and think, Bob in his kitchen had that right somehow. Bob, have you got information or something else?
Information.
Excellent. Some of my faves are information.
Information. At this point in the plot, she twists her ankle. He watches the owls. The car runs out of gas. At this point in the plot, the railroad tracks curve out of sight. The notices posted on the power pole take on a new meaning. The dogs cry like babies. At this point, the trees become an exception. The room a mistake that gives them hope. At this point, they are taught the truth about the sky.
Wow, there you have it. He's been called the kitchen laureate in the chat. I love that. So, Bob, no one ends an open mic quite like you. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. I'm always up for more information. So yeah, next Saturday we have Robert Kelly, an iconic figure in the, I would say, surrealist movement. Do join us, and his wife Charlotte Mandel, and several poets from the Amazon, translated by Tiffany Higgins. So don't forget that. In the interim, just to say bye-bye, I'm going to read you a little poem that came out in my book, Pearl Diver Irumani from White Pine, last year. It's called Gravity's End. Before the forest, there was an ocean, and before the ocean, a stone. But before the stone, there was only space, filling up with ooze and light. Heavenly the universe is, inside the mind, devilish each single world. Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful show. Wishing you a fantastic weekend, or what's left of it, and lots of kisses, love poetry. Love you guys. Take care. See you soon.
Bye, everyone. Don't forget to eat chocolate for breakfast tomorrow.